What's up, Liron here, and in this video I'm going to show you how I paint this. The whole idea behind this painting is how to create a hazy, misty, foggy feeling. And the way to do that is actually quite simple, but you won't necessarily think about it in every instance you'll encounter this. And the way is, you see the background here, you have to make it lighter than it appears to be. Okay, so that's kind of the trick. I'm going to show you exactly how it's done. Very happy with how this one turned out. Let's get started. So let's start with the drawing, and again, the haziness is what we'll focus on here, and to do that I have to do something that challenges myself, and that is keep things light and try not to push the contrasts to be too strong and stark and kind of dead in some ways sometimes when I do it. So we have the horizon line that's kind of upper middle, so we'll do this kind of thing. And this is where the water will be. This is the shaded part of the water, and we're going to build this one up slowly because there are a couple of challenges that we're going to face. Okay, and we'll see how it goes and we'll learn from the experience. The pencil I'm using is a 4B. A lot of people ask me what pencils I'm using. I'm using all sorts, but the thing is, if you're using a B grade, it will melt a bit more with the water and will kind of dissolve. If you're using an H grade that I don't like, it will stay on paper. It's the very strong, hard lead that kind of scratches the surface, and I don't like that. So what I'm doing is I mostly use an HB, so kind of down the middle, a 4B or a 6B even. I love these, and that's a good move, I think. So in any case, here's the reflection. There's the dock here, and it's tied to the dock, so I'm going to put that in. It's going to be a bit of a complex scene compared to its size and the actual level of details in it, which is very low. So we'll have to keep our wits, is that something you say? And be careful. So basically I established a horizon line, a boat, the mast, some trees here and some trees in the background, okay, the dock, and I don't even think I'll treat this lower patch of grass here. I could. You know what, let's put it in. Let's put it in, see what happens. Maybe we'll learn that we shouldn't do this in the future, but well, let's see, because I feel like it'll be a nice frame with the trees up top and this here. So now I'm going to start with the painting process, and I'm actually happy that I have a lot of different weird, awkward paints here on the palette, because I'm going to mix a very neutral gray that's just slightly towards the blue. And it's going to be very watered down. You see, it's so watered down that when I dip my brush in the bucket, it drips into the mix. Okay, so it has to be this light. And I'm just going to get started. So I'm going to put this light value here. Now I do want to leave some highlights that are going to be white. But the initial wash, and again, because it's hazy, it's going to be so light. And notice I don't negative paint around the mast. I don't do any of that. I don't care about any of that. The only thing I'm establishing here is the larger highlights, okay? I'm even going over the water here, that's important. So over the water, and I'm gonna leave some highlights for the actual boat. So I'm painting around that, mainly around its top part and the dock. Or the dock, you know what, I may, let's leave it white for now. Let's leave it light. And let's just add a bit more of the mix here close towards us, towards the foreground. A bit more green perhaps to wrap it up. And this is pretty much, notice how much paint I take to get this wet and wet done, because you have to beat the wetness of the paper. But let's lift back up some of this. We're pretty much done with the initial wash of just establishing the basics of the scene. We're gonna let this dry for a while. Let's lift back more on that. I don't need this dark area. So I'm just drying the brush and lifting back some of the paint. And with that being said, we'll let it dry and come back for the rest of the washes. So now comes the real magic, and let's talk strategy. This background with all the trees has to be lighter than we think in order to create that hazy feeling, okay? Now it's going to be fairly cool as well, so a lot of blues, maybe a hint of yellow. I will try a negative paint around the mast because it's such a small shape and I think I can do it. Then connect it to the water, and from there we'll take it and play by ear. So first, a lot of blue, but fairly muted. It's slightly blue, but it's also more gray, I would say, than blue. So a bit of yellow, but just a bit because it's very dominant, a bit of red. Let's mute this down and then see what it looks like, and maybe we'll... This looks good, but maybe a touch of blue in it. Here we go. So let's get started on that. And the background here has to be very simple as well, okay? So like this. Using the dry brush just to get a nice little variety of edge around the top. I'm gonna paint a little carefully around the mask, but that's it. I'm gonna go back to the normal operation mode, let's say. Here and there. Here as well on the other side, so I have this nice little highlight here. Again, sometimes I won't do that, but this time I felt like I want to. Now I'm gonna darken things up just ever so slightly and also green them up a little, because I feel like the bottom part starts to hint towards this green, but very gently and very insignificantly. So, and you could just leave it flat and it will still work. But the most important part is to merge shapes wherever you can. See how I negatively painted around the mask? It wasn't a disaster, it's still possible, you just have to be a little careful. I even got a little nice hint of another, maybe rope or something like that. And then I'm gonna bring this part with the ripples in the water. Close off this area, I don't need that. And I think we're pretty much done with what's at the back. It's fairly hazy again, barely any details there. Let's get started on the front. I'm gonna switch to a smaller brush. This boat is fairly small, and for this, I can see a beautiful red. Let's try and approach this boat in a more alla prima kind of approach. So I'm actually gonna start with these reds and see where that takes us. So a bit of reds all around the top parts of the boat, maybe a bit of a pure red. Just a bit of blue in mine. Like so. I wanted to show, it doesn't have to be very blatant, this red, but I want it to be felt to some extent in the next couple of stages, okay? So again, I go off with way too much yellow and lose the blue and the red, so let's go back to it here. And while it's still wet, I'm connecting, and I'm gonna negative paint around these floaties, like so. Like that, 1, 2, and we're done. And I'm looking at the reference, but you have to at some point kind of let go of some of it at least and kind of trust your instincts, because if you constantly stare at it, you may miss the point on paper itself. So you have to kind of find your balance. Now I'm going to add these ripples underneath the boat. And then remember that a lot of the haziness is going to come once I add the darker foliage and some of the darker areas at the front. So don't worry about it, we're taking our time here, but that's probably it for the boat. Let's add a bit of a dark basis. I don't see it in the reference photo, but let's do it. Let's darken up the base a bit. What else we have here? We have this yellow tarp in the middle. White tarp in the middle. I'm gonna add some hints of shadows to it, but not much, because not much is there. And then finally we have the place where you sit. So I'm gonna put that in like that. It's all fairly dark. And a bit of darkness here, and a hint of it here. I can already put this kind of line right through here like that. Connect this wire with the dock, and that's pretty much it. Now the dock I'm gonna do in kind of more green approach, and hopefully you can see the details well. It's a fairly small painting with a smaller area that's detailed. The rest really is simple here, simplified. Let's add a bit more blue onto this part, wet and wet. A bit of a hint at the back side of the dock, and then the reflections here, the ripply kind of effect to show that there are some ripples in the water. Now here we come to the foreground, so let's add a bit of more red. I don't know, try and warm it up. We have this kind of bench thing, seating area. A bit, now let's split. Let's do a bit of blue. See what happens. Do a bit of blue, then a bit of yellow. And see where it gets us. Again, the yellow is very opaque, so you get this I don't know, interesting pattern here, and you can really see it on top. That can be an advantage if you're used to working that way. I'm actually not, but I'll try and get used to it. And here we have maybe a bit of a bush or I don't know, a bit of a tree. Let's get a bit more yellow in here onto this tree, a couple of small twigs just to give off the feeling. And this is pretty much done. Now, in this point, most of the painting is actually done. All we have left is to add some of the darker foliage, some details here in the dock. I'm gonna do that right now, actually. So let's start adding a bit of these lines. I'm gonna add the line of the mast here. This is pretty much dry. I'm gonna have to be careful with it. Like so, that looks nice. A bit of these kind of, you know, things on the mast. There is a bit of wires running across. Let's do that kind of thing here. I'm gonna totally blow this one up, but let's see, like this, that's fine. And if it's too strong, you just dab out some of it, like that. See, I made it slightly lighter. Now, there are some ripples in the water that I haven't given any attention to, so let's do that now. Sometimes close to the bank, there is more of this kind of ripples going on, so here we go. And you want to make sure to make the pattern as random as you can. It's a challenge. Our brains aren't used to randomness. They want to see the patterns, they want to convey the patterns, but you want to be as random as you can. Notice how much this brings us to the foreground in a very nice little way here. So keep it random, and I think this is pretty much it. They're slightly at an angle, or at two angles. It's not going to be perfect, but I think that's close enough. What else? I think that's it. Now we can just give this a couple of minutes to dry, and we'll add the trees coming from the sides, and we'll see what we get. Maybe we get a nice result, maybe we didn't. But the most important thing is we did our best, and we tried to get the right impression. You can't always get it. There's a couple of ripples here. We need to wait for regardless, so let's add them. Not too much though, and don't overdo it. Maybe a bit of a dry brush strokes here to make some broken ripples. Here as well, in the background. I could add a bit of a dry brush here just to show where the trees meet the river. And yeah, we're gonna let this a couple of seconds to dry and come back with some trees. So I think this is ready for those trees. Now the trick here is to not get too caught up in the details again. So you just have to put it in one go. Okay, so I'm just starting to put the trees in. They're a bit greener than this part and the background. That's exactly what we want, actually. Like this, to show that they're a little more at the front. This is why I turned them green. A bit of this kind of thing. Very random patterns. Again, try and make it as random as possible. Perhaps a branch or two, like this. Close off these gaps. Some of the gaps aren't necessary. The composition is questionable. I don't know if that's the best way of doing it, but I'm good with that. I'm good with trying it out. You see how it closes off the back. Now I feel like it needs some darkening, so let's add a bit of Carbazole Violet to it. And I always say I use mainly 3 colors, but I will use some power colors if I need to get some effect in, or some kind of special property that my power color has. I won't always need one, but sometimes I do. So here we go, another tree. This side has a lot more branches to it. And it's a bit greener, so let's add a bit more yellow to it. Try it out. And I think we got a nice little combination here of the haziness feeling in the background. I'm going to put in a couple of leaves here. If I had not kept the background as light as it is, I wouldn't have been able to put in these details and have them visible, because the contrast wouldn't have been enough. You need a really light background sometimes to have this kind of effect. Now I'm running the risk of having this overworked. I'm fine with that because I do want to maximize this effect here. So I'm going to have another one coming through here. Connect these shapes in, make them look random, and I think with that we're done. Hopefully we get the feeling of looking through the trees onto the boat, and then the distance where things are really light. It's not always an easy effect to achieve, but I think it worked out rather nicely here. Let's add just a bit of a white touches here and there, like this. There's a bit of white to the left here that I kind of left a bit too thick perhaps, but that's fine. It still works out nicely actually. I think it looks really good. What else? There's a bit of a highlight on these floaties, and I could add, just for fun, a few highlights on the leaves here. Again, if you don't take a risk, you wouldn't learn what works and what doesn't, so I like to do that occasionally, because it does seem like there are a couple of highlights here and there. But I think with that, we can wrap this one up. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I'd like to do this face to face. So this is it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one. And again, you see the whole magic is in the values in this case, but also temperature can help. A lot of different factors can contribute to that feeling. And it's just a matter of doing an attempt after an attempt after an attempt. You won't get these things normally in the first go. So take your time, try it out a couple of times. You never really fail, you just learn new things. I want to remind you that my frustration-free watercolor course is going to be out really, really soon. Probably in the next, I don't know, next couple of videos I'll start mentioning it and linking to it so you can check it out. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I will see you again in the next vid real soon.